Before this video begins, I'd like to take a moment to point out some things. Firstly, I'm writing this before the Hamwick mystery is solved, so my opinions may change in that time. Second, sorry for the awful mic quality. I'm using a microphone that's built into the headset that I'm using, rather than one that's actually, like, professional, a full microphone, you know what I mean. And finally, this is going to be talking entirely about a webcomic on Webtoons called Sword of Arcadia. It's made by some loser named Frostiii who's afraid of mods. I'll leave a link to both the comic and her YouTube and Twitch in the description. Go check her out. There will be spoilers in this video. With all that said, she's really entertaining. Let's get into the video now. Sword of Arcadia is great. It's something special to make characters you can get attached to. And guys, I'm attached. However, since I am Earth's worst bunny, I take it upon myself to review this comic. Today I plan on giving my thoughts on the comic's story and how I personally would have changed it. Saying that I would change some things does not necessarily mean that I'd make it better. In fact, some of my changes may end up actually making for a worse comic. However, Frostiii herself has stated that she loves seeing different interpretations from artists, and while I am no artist, I can still give a different interpretation. Now, please also note that I am not an expert in character design or stories, writing in general. I'm simply someone who thinks occasionally, and someone who can definitely be considered a fan of the comic, which means that I can speak from the viewpoint of being a part of the target audience, just a common fan. Now, first I want to take a look at the characters' designs, specifically the main three of Jackie, Michael, and Ashton. Now, since Michael is the protagonist of the story, wink, let's start with him. Michael has a simple design of wearing a red hoodie, jeans, and his boots. Now, this is a very simple design and, from experience, very easy to cosplay. However, for a medieval series, having one of your main three wear a hoodie is questionable. Frostiii herself has actually given a reason as to why he wears a hoodie, saying that she thought it was just going to be a simple hee-hoo funny, and then only afterwards realized it's a medieval series. She kept it anyways, though, and added some interesting lore behind it. Frostiii has also posted Michael's new updated design multiple places, and it fixes the issue. However, the red hoodie is iconic, and I probably won't change it. Plus, since one, there's not a reference, and two, it's not in the comic yet, I'm not going to speak much about it. The red hoodie definitely made it easier to make in Tony Hawk, though. One big change I would do, however, is to get rid of the stupid mullet. Cut the lad's hair, because based on every drawing with short-haired Michael, he's so much better. His personality is pretty good, with the exception that he seems like half a comedy character and half a serious one with a hurtful past. We'll get to see his backstory eventually, but based on the wounds we see at the end of the last chapter, chapter 13, I think it's chapter 13, don't quote me on that, yikes. I think it'd be very interesting if he being dumb and stupid was all just an act, and that persona of his is the only thing really suppressing those bad memories. It would add that layer of emotion and attachment to him on top of the layer of love that we have because his existence is just absolutely stupid and hilarious. Next up, I want to talk about Ashton, the character who arguably should be the protagonist in this story. I'll touch on that later. However, first, I want to talk about his design. Ashton has a dumb, almost A-shaped haircut, and honestly, I'm not a fan of the rest of his design either. He's wearing a white button-up shirt underneath a desaturated orange jacket with rolled-up sleeves, a yellow backpack, rolled-up khaki pants, boots, and his scarf. His scarf is the most meaningful piece of cloth on his body, but since we don't know if there are any story details of it, I can't talk about it just yet. I can instead, however, talk about how I hate his actual design. Ashton's design isn't that bad, however, personally, it does not vibe with me. If I were making the design, the first thing I would do is get rid of the dumb rolled up pants. Have him either just wear shorts, or, the way I'd go, have him just not roll up his pants. If you're insistent to have him wear his stupid roll up pants, then another solution would be just to trim down his legs, so that way his legs aren't an entire chonk factory. Admittedly, it's not as bad as I remember it being, but it's still a little on the edge. Now, whether this was part of Frostii's art style or if this was intentional, I cannot say, and honestly, it's not my job to care. Next, I'd change up the haircut. If you look at the early concept art for him, you'll notice a massive change in design. The first one, he was wearing a hat. He looked like Luke from Professor Layton. His next one, he started to look a bit more like the Ashton we know today. His third one looked like it had taken a small step back to the first art style, but the last one is the one that we have now. Personally, I think that the two middle are the best designs, period. His middle two designs, I imagine they had like a smooth, almost clay-like look to it. And while it could just be the angle, the little bangs, the little bang, singular bang, hanging down looks like it's slightly curling to one side. Both design elements are gone in the final version, and it just looks like a mess. Personally, his hair really reminds me of Alphino and Alize from Final Fantasy XIV, and I think going in like a smoother direction to that, and going back to the smooth, like it actually looks like it makes sense, haircut of the middle two, and the first one, I think that it would be a step up. Now, you would also notice an A-shaped hairpin in his earliest two designs. I think adding a pin to his scarf with that A on it would be a very interesting idea. It would be a nice callback to that early design element that was dropped. Speaking of the scarf, the next change would be to make his scarf look not only longer, but to make it look like it has more motion to it. Personally, I think his middle two designs are, again, perfect, and his second design specifically pulls this off really well. The scarf is just far enough away from the body to where it looks like there is actually a breeze coming from behind him moving the scarf. Based on his reference, there isn't enough scarf to pull that off. Just a few more changes left, and I think one of them is to get rid of the backpack or make it smaller. His back pose actually has the backpack shown to be covering the scarf, and I would make the top of the bag shorter and maybe add small holes in the side, since that's usually what I see in bags like he has. Next, I would change his shirt from a button-up to a padded shirt. Now, this doesn't actually change anything. I just hate button-ups. It did actually change something, and then I forgot what it changed. So it doesn't change anything. I just hate button-ups. Finally, I do something about the color scheme. It's really desaturated, and while that's probably the best and most accurate for the time frame, personally I find dull orange and dull yellow to be a bit, well, dull. Still, using orange and yellow is a splendid idea, especially more so if you give Jackie more blue. We'll get to her. But it doesn't really work when looking at it. It provides this awkward color when memorizing the cast, and it just doesn't look entirely right. The last character on my list is Jackie, and the first decision I'd make regarding her character is to give her an outfit that isn't just ripping off Shrek. But seriously, I think that Jackie's design is actually okay, however, that does not mean that it's flawless. I'd make the cloak longer and maybe add more bottles to her belt, and I mentioned before giving her more blue elements. And I think that changing the cloak to blue would be an interesting fix. I actually really like the shade of blue that was used, with the problem being I wish it was a little more saturated. I also think giving her some sort of gloves or even just wrist tape would just add a little more to her overall design in terms of color. Once again, I'm suggesting the same shade of blue. Now I hear you wondering, why blue of all colors? That's because we have Michael in his red hoodie, Ashton's redesign with a more saturated focus on orange and yellow, and now we have an edited Jackie with a focus on blue. Those three colors are commonly put together, and putting them together here seems as though it fit really well. Given that Jackie is still relatively new, I can't really say much more for her. To close this off, I want to state that I actually have a bit more to say. However, that's all in terms of story, and I want to save that for when Hemwick is over, so for now, I think I did a fair job of redesigning the characters. Part 2 will be out eventually. It just really depends on when the comic gets updated. As more major players hop in, I'll likely do a follow-up video where I speak on the characters added and their designs and such. Now I've said all I needed to, so I shall say no more. Have a great night, fellas.